Welcome to today's digital on-demand webisode titled How to Identify the Ideal Client. The Greater Houston Partnership works to make Houston one of the best places to live, work, and build a business. With more than 1,000 member companies representing approximately 1/5 of the region's workforce, the partnership champions Houston's growth by bringing together businesses and civic-minded leaders who are dedicated to the region's long-term success. Learn more at houston.org. The Small Business Matters program is designed for high-growth, smart small businesses to make valuable business connections. Members include C-suite, sales, marketing, and business development professionals. Included with this program is digital on-demand programming, workshops and meetups, business and professional leadership training, business expos, and access to data and research to get important information on the economy. And now a word from our sponsor.
Over the course of Lift Fund's 24-year history, we are proud to have served nearly 20,000 small businesses with over $270 million in loans. We are the nation's leading micro lender. We make loans as low as $500 all the way up to $500,000. So whereas Lift Fund continues to provide working capital to small business entrepreneurs, both for startups as well as growth capital, hiring employees, we do that through the microloans that we make, but also we fill a growing capital need for businesses whose borrowing needs encroach over the $50,000 to $100,000 range. We are also one of the leading CDFI lenders in the Small Business Administration's 7A Community Advantage loan program.
Today's webisode will feature Greater Houston Partnership member Sandler Training and will focus on how to identify the ideal client.
Hi, I'm Angela Gray. We're here with Sandler Training. I also have Matt Reister here. He's one of our senior consultants. So we work with Sandler Training, which is we help small, mid-sized companies grow and develop. We help them close more deals, get in front of more prospects, while without giving away too much margin in the process.
Yeah, so I think today the idea is to really kind of get into the topic of how do we really find our ideal client, maybe what is our ideal client, and when you think about it, it could be some of the challenges that we're faced with is, are there enough clients out there for us? What really are we looking for? And ultimately, how do we really get into a conversation, I think, that's meaningful to them, that maybe separates us from our competition? So if you really think about some of the challenges that we face, I think it's maybe in a couple of those three buckets. And so first and foremost, I think when you really think about the ideal client, kind of liken it to a scavenger hunt, and that is, do we know what we're looking for? I've got 3 young kids at home, and my 5-year-old always seems to have this way of saying, "Hey, Daddy, can you help me?" And I'll say, "Help you what?" He goes, "Well, I'm looking for something." And I'll say, "Looking for what?" And he's like, "Well, I think it's up here." And I'm like, "Okay, so what are we looking for?" And he goes, "Well," he says, "just help me find it, Daddy." And I'll ask him time and time again, and he really doesn't tell me. And so we go on this kind of mystified scavenger hunt of something that he's looking for. And ultimately we get to that point where either A, he stumbles on it and he goes, "Oh, there it is," or he kind of alludes a little more and gives me maybe a couple of more clues as to what it is. And if you think about developing a market or a territory, maybe looking for customers, a lot of times maybe we find ourselves on a scavenger hunt with a 5-year-old. And so as we head down that process, and we're going out there looking to develop that territory, grow our business, grow our share, do we really know what we're looking for? Have we defined kind of what the end game is? And so let's look at it from a couple of different pieces. First and foremost, what is the ideal client? What exactly are we looking for? You heard Angela mention early on in our introduction, we're small to medium-sized businesses, could be 5 employees up to 100 employees, 100 salespeople. It's typically going to fall somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from maybe $1 million, $2 million in revenue, all the way up to 100, 125 million. Typically private ownership, local ownership here in Houston, because we know that it takes ownership to invest in change with their teams and development of their culture and their sales team and common processes methodology. So the end game for us is defined. Now, does that mean that we don't go outside of that ideal client? It doesn't. It just, we know what the core is. We know the challenges that those business faces and how that they face and how we interact with them. And so for us, as you guys think about what is your ideal client, maybe it's revenue, maybe it's employee size, maybe it's number of markets, whatever it is, think about kind of what is that end game, what is the profile of the company, and what are some of the things that you guys do well in terms of what that is. And I think that's kind of filling in the bucket or the description of what the client looks like or the profile of the client. But there's a couple other steps that I think we really have to concern ourselves with. And so let's talk about, kind of as you look at the slide here, 3 pieces that we really want to focus on, because it's not only knowing what we're looking for, but it's a couple of other areas that we have to be aware of as we kind of step into that market. So first and foremost, really, what is our belief system as we step out there to engage with the ideal client, or as we look for that ideal client? What do we believe about our company in terms of how we deliver to our ideal client? Do we really believe the products and the services carry the value that we're asked to come out and sell? The last piece is obviously we're starting down a road of prospecting. And if we had a room full of people here, we'd say, out of the room, who loves to prospect? Who really likes to go out and knock on doors, go into environments where we're not always welcome, where maybe equal business stature isn't necessarily fostered, and face a whole lot of no's? Some of you might raise your hand, but the overwhelming majority of salespeople would probably down deep admit that they don't like prospecting. And so as we approach that process, what really is our mindset as the salesperson? It's interesting. One of the Sandler cornerstones, one of the Sandler philosophies is transactional analysis. And transactional analysis talks about the different ego states that we're in: the parent, the adult, the child. Obviously, parent being a lot of nurturing, or critical parent, don't cross the street. All the scripts that we heard from messages or people of authority. Obviously, the child is a response to that. Somewhere the adult plays in the middle and referees and decides what's right, what's not right. And it's always funny as we come into this prospecting environment, because I'll tell most salespeople, look, the fact that you don't like to go in and talk to people isn't necessarily your fault. Matter of fact, if you're struggling in that area, you can actually call your mother and blame it on her, because one of the messages that we've heard all throughout our life is don't talk to strangers. And so now all of a sudden we're thrust into this world where it's not only finding our ideal client, but now we've got to go out and engage in a conversation. So as we head into this environment, what are our own scripts? What are the tapes that play in our head that potentially keep us from knocking on that door? Because the ideal client, the profile that we're looking for, is only good as the paper it's written on if we're not willing to take that step. And so how really do we engage in that first step? How really do we go out there and do the things that we have to do, overcome these beliefs? As you step out there and you have to engage in a sea of people that don't know you, and maybe use competitors, and you've got to get them to change, it becomes the behaviors, the other part of the triangle that we really have to focus on. And so we'll think about behaviors in maybe 3 buckets. The first and foremost is, do we really know what we want to accomplish? Do we have an end game? Do we have goals set? Goals really, if we think about goals, it becomes our motivation. We sit in front of a lot of leadership, and leadership will ask questions about how do we keep people motivated, right? I mean, we can help them identify ideal clients. Maybe we know who our ideal clients are, but how do we get our salespeople to go out and knock on doors? And how do we keep them motivated? So I would think about goals as you're going out there in 2 forms. Number one, what do you want to accomplish personally? What does it mean if you go out and do this stuff? How does it impact you? How does it impact your personal life? What does it mean to your career? But then also understand, what are the goals for my territory? Right? How many of these ideal clients do I need? What is the revenue production that I need from them? Out of that number, right, how many cold calls do I have to make? How many of those cold calls do I need to turn into first-time meetings? And so what begins to come out of the goals is we begin to functionally get a plan. And the reason the plan becomes so important is because as we go through this venture, we've got to know, are we on track? And so much like waypoints and vectors in a flight plan, we need a prospecting plan. We need to know how many people we need to be talking to every week. We need to know how many of those conversations need to turn into sit-down, face-to-face meetings. And we need to know how many of those meetings need to turn into proposals, how many proposals actually will turn into a client. And so not only understanding what we want to try to accomplish, but having that plan to help us get there allows us to fine-tune, allows us to track it. I think really more so than anything else, allows us to take a little bit of stress off because we have the plan. We're not winging it. Sales is a disciplined activity. It takes guts, it takes energy. It takes a lot of what we call vitality to go out every day and do things that are out of our comfort zone. We mentioned the attitudes, we mentioned the beliefs that we have. If we're going to go out and overcome those, it takes energy. And so are we doing the things every single day that we need to do that is going to maintain that energy, that's going to help us go out and do those things? Sales, it's a gutsy profession. It's gutsy to find that ideal client. It's gutsy to sit in front of that prospect that we really want and maybe come to a point in that conversation where we might have to say something like, Angela, I'm not really sure that it makes sense for us to carry on the conversation. I'm not really seeing a huge reason why you would stop doing maybe what you're doing today and do something different with us. And so, in those moments, do we have those 5 seconds of guts? We've talked about the attitude piece, really what our belief systems coming into looking for this client. We've also talked about the behaviors, the goals, the plans, the actions. And last, really just kind of like to leave you with, what is your tactical plan? What are the techniques that you're going to use to engage once you do identify the prospect or the prospective ideal client? How do you carry yourself? What is your personal presence when you enter into these conversations? Are you aware of what are the problems, what are the things that your customers, your prospects deal with on a day in and day out basis that you and your company, the products and the services that you provide solve for that customer? A lot of salespeople go in and talk features and benefits. And one of the challenges when we talk features and benefits is that's what everybody else does that comes into that environment. Well, two things happen with that. Number one, we look and sound like everybody else. And that's the biggest piece. The second piece is that features and benefits are about us. Your prospects don't want to talk about you. They want to talk about them. And then when they're talking about them, they can't correlate the features and benefits, what you do, how it relates to their problems. And so are we tactically going in and talking about things that are going to create a genuine reason for somebody to spend outside of that 3 or 4 minute cold call, whatever the time is, to really sit down with you and begin to qualify, is there motivation to change? Are they willing to and able to spend the time and the money and the resources to do the things that it's going to take to sell, to buy your product or to your service? And then are we talking to all the right decision makers? So without that conversation, or without understanding what our strategic value proposition, if you will, it's hard for them to correlate those dots. So understand what it is you're trying to accomplish when you walk in, when you make that cold call, break the pattern, understand what's going to qualify, disqualify, and know what your second step is. And that second step is typically a meeting where we're going to sit down and take a deeper dive and really begin to understand the facet of their business. We're going to really begin to understand where they're trying to take the business, maybe some of the obstacles, hurdles that they're having trouble overcoming, so that we can really begin to figure out, does it make sense to change? And so understand, again, what are those first two strategic steps in your process? What are the questions that you need to be asking? What are the red flags? We oftentimes go into it wanting to qualify, but we need to understand what is it that also causes us to disqualify. And so, much like getting in that airplane, if anything was to happen, you wouldn't want the pilot to panic and say, oh my gosh, what do I do next? Or you wouldn't want them to try to figure out the direction they're going. Have that strategic approach. Know the questions that you need to be asking during the call so that you're tactically efficient and you're moving the process forward. When you put all three of those things together, on top of really understanding who you're looking for, what are some of the characteristics, when you get the mindset right, when our attitude is in the right place, the belief systems are there, and we have the behaviors and the goals to either change those belief systems if they're not right, or work hand in hand with them, and then we go out and do the things that's only going to make us better from a technique perspective. All three of those things together generate success. And I think you will ultimately convert what starts out as our ideal client into a customer.
Again, we would like to thank Lift Fund as the inaugural Small Biz Matters Digital On-Demand Series sponsor and Sandler Training for sharing. Reminder to check out the remaining bite-sized digital on-demand episodes in the 2018 lineup. Please access the Greater Houston Partnership's Small Business Resource page and opt into our mailing list to receive additional release dates as well as imperative information pertinent to local small businesses.